Chapter 1 of Sinister House by Leland Hall. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ben Tucker. Chapter 1. We hit upon the same thought at precisely the same instant, my wife and I, as we started home from Julia's. Coming out from the gloomy driveway and turning to the right along the main road, the night a bit wild with wind and the moonlight hitting the earth hard through rifts in the racing cloud, my wife spoke the words with me. How gay she was after all! Such little happenings are not always so mysterious as they seem. In this case there was cause enough for us to hit upon the same thought at the same moment, a mournful spirit always walking in the driveway to the house in which Julia and Eric lived. And that night Eric was away and Julia was alone in the place. Many a time before, having left them together in the dark house behind, my wife and I half sighed with relief as we came up from the blackness under the hemlocks that roofed the driveway and gained the flat high road, bare of trees and blessedly free under sun, stars, or cloud from lugubrious shadows. We had often spoken of the melancholy that breathed round the house and grounds, puzzled to explain it since Eric was warm-hearted and cordial, and Julia had a way with her that put guests at their ease, and they adored each other. Perhaps he loved her too intensely. I have since thought of that. His very ardor of attention, maybe, put it into our subconsciousness that he was protecting her against, well, anything. You see, it was easy enough to fill the black shadows under those old hemlocks with menaces to the welfare of Eric and Julia, and since many others felt as we felt about the place, though not so keenly, I suppose, the stimulus to the imagination must have been something that was evident to all the friends who visited the house. Nothing therein was so evident as Eric's restless and forever protecting love of his wife. After spending an evening with him and her, one might well shiver with fear lest something harm her and hence drive him mad. The black shadows under those trees could easily secrete wickedness. To those who knew Eric and Julia less intimately than we, I am aware that this will appear a little far-fetched. There was a very noticeable element of tenderness in him which might belie what, for the sake of my argument, I must call his alertness, as against an inexorable hostility. Then, too, wives who attract a jealous watchfulness from their husbands usually suggest the possibility of evasion, a fleeing over the traces. But Julia loved Eric with a love that would, and did, go through hellfire unchanged. He was wholly sure of her love. We all were. I think no one lost sight of that, even when to some it could not but seem that his presence was to her a source of... well, let that go for the present. It was natural enough for my wife and me to ejaculate at the same moment the surprising fact that Julia, alone in the gloomy house save for a grouchy servant, and with Eric gone from her for the first time since they had been married, had seemed unusually gay. Perhaps I should say gay as she used to be in the first days when we knew her. We had feared that she might be sadly depressed by his absence. As we drove home that night, we recalled to each other, in phrases snatched from our lips by the gale, Eric's sorrow at being forced to leave her, even for the brief space of 2 weeks. Lately she had not been well. Her delicately colored face had slowly been losing its color, and its delicate lines were being drawn, especially about the eyes, in which both Annette and I had observed from time to time a look of apprehension. Sleeplessness might have made her look so. Just before Eric went away, she had come to walk with a certain weariness, and Annette, naturally a keener observer than I, had declared to me that Julia struck her as a woman beset by nervousness at night and exhausted by day. While all this was slighter than my words about it, it was real enough for Eric to feel that Julia should not accompany him on a tiresome business trip, and though Julia dreaded being separated from him, she evidently recognized the wisdom of her staying quietly at home while he was gone. "I cannot bear the thought of his leaving me, and I want most dreadfully to go with him," she told Annette. "But, well, I am a little run down, and we both think I had better not try it. After all," she went on with a half-sad smile, "we simply are two persons, and we can't always be with each other." And then she added with a surprisingly different tone, which Annette could neither describe nor reproduce, "We must be sensible, yes, sensible, reasonable." When we got home that night, when I had filled my pipe, and Annette, plumper than the berries since the baby was born, had kicked off her slippers, and we sat down for a little chat together before going upstairs to bed. It was the very reasonableness of Eric and Julia that we agreed upon. Though, I remarked judicially, I should think Eric would have sent her to pass the time of his absence in some more cheerful place. That would have been the wholly sensible thing to do.
"What more have you ever learned of that house, Pierre?" my wife asked me by way of rejoinder.
She had sent me once to find out something. We felt the place had almost a personality, not, as you will have gleaned, one wholly pleasant to us. But that may not have been entirely because of its spookiness. I am an American, and I am a chauvinist enough, is that the word? To be prejudiced in favor of a new concrete house. As for Annette, with 2 children to safeguard, she's all for the up-to-date in ventilation, plumbing, and orientation. Thorsby, where we lived, was being built of houses of the kind that are put up quickly and that last, theoretically, should last, long. Most of them had not been built long enough as yet to test the boast of architects and promoters that they had called for next to no repairs. While they were cheap, they were good, and they were blessedly clean and full of sun and air. Thorsby was a settlement of commuters, most of them well enough off to own an automobile, few of them rich enough to hire a chauffeur. There were perhaps 20 young married couples bringing up their infants there. We hadn't yet much of a community spirit, but such a thing was beginning to crystallize around the general need. We all had babies growing rapidly in the way of nature, for schools. You see, there had never been a village of Thorsby. The Common Sense Realty Company, specially incorporated under the laws of New York, had bought up some 10 square miles of land on the high plateau above the river, had drained the swampy places, laid out a few rods, cut down the moth-eaten trees, and marked off the terrain into generous house lots. The name Thorsby had come from the maternal grandfather of the up-and-coming young man whose brain had engendered the Common Sense Realty Company. He was Bob Planter. We had him to dinner once, Annette and I, and took to him wholeheartedly. Like all young American businessmen, he had an eye out for the money in the scheme. But equally like them, let me say like us, he had a sort of glorious inspiration, and dreamed of the future of the place, and loved planning for it. Saw it all in the rosy light of enthusiastic yet common-sense youth. After all, the United States of America were born in a clearing, and they've cleared the way before them as they've grown. If to me there's a romance about a brand-new cement house and a bare, flat plot of land, it's because I've inherited the forward-looking temperament from my grandfathers. I write this by way of gentle protest, because I remember that Annette's second cousin, Giles Farrow, a gifted but temperamental artist, was staying with us the night young Planter came to dinner, and that he called Thorsby hopeless, naked, new, and American. Why, of course American. But that was the very reason it wasn't hopeless. Nothing could down Planter's enthusiasm, but on the other hand, nothing could soften my wife's cousin's resentment. Meadow grasses were beautiful. Find a way to kill off mosquitoes, but keep your meadows. You can restore moth-eaten trees and protect them from pests in the future. But drain your meadows and cut down all your trees. You take all natural charm and individuality from the place. "Well," replied Planter with unperturbed good humor, "the sun still sets in the west, over the river, and we have grand sunsets, my friend." Giles paid no more attention to him than if he had not spoken. "Take that old place behind the hemlocks, back in on the river 3 miles or so up," he went on. "That has charm, softness, atmosphere." Atmosphere. I shudder now when I think of that place. But I remember that then Planter laughed heartily at picking as a model for the Common Sense Realty Company such a broken-down old wooden house, all squat and dark on the edge of a precipice down to the river one way, and shut off from the sun and the rest of the world by a bunch of damp and half-rotten old evergreens the other. It was that same night I learned my first about the house. I myself had never laid eyes on it, but my wife's cousin, walking in a fever of wounded susceptibilities, and dragging my wife along with him, had made a beeline out of the squarely planned and flat Thorsby, on across the fields towards a clump of trees on a distant headland that jutted out into the river. Having reached these, they pushed their way through and came upon the wooden house. It was, as Planter said, built on the very edge of the cliff. On all but the river side, it was surrounded by a thicket of hemlocks, which had been set out not more than 50 feet from the house itself. Planter had penetrated the thicket in the early days of the Thorsby survey, and had found the narrow bit of land between the house and the trees overgrown with tall grass, weeds, and thistles. He had found the house broken down, sashes without glass, shutters dangling from one hinge, sections of the gutters fallen askew, and the paint peeled off. But my wife and her cousin had found a smooth lawn, a house which seemed to be in good repair, and a charming lady and a lanky, low-voiced gentleman evidently living there, tying up foxgloves in bloom along the southern wall. Since the afternoon of that chance encounter, both my wife and I had become intimate with Eric and Julia Greer, and had grown really to love them. But to both of us the house had remained rather antipathetic. Greer himself, in answer to my direct inquiries, had told me that Julia and he had stumbled on it during their honeymoon, and Julia had fallen in love with it. Had felt drawn to it at once, which was singular enough since, as perhaps you know, the old house was all a ruin, and to me at least, depressing. Julia, in her own sweet way, so bright and vivacious in the early days of our acquaintance, told several of us one night at dinner there, some time before midsummer, that when she first laid eyes on the house, she had a queer feeling that all the doors and windows opened to her, and that something really called to her from within to come and live and be happy there. "Yes," she went on, her bright eyes glowing, "be happy there. Why, it sang to me, really sang as I went towards it, like a—" I forget her word, but I remember the radiance in her eyes as she looked towards her husband, and how his eyes gave back her look. Later on, when, once more, not wholly casually, I asked him about the house, I remember he said, "To tell the truth, I didn't feel drawn to it, as Julia felt. But to be able to give my wife the one thing she desired above all others, it really took hold of her, and to be able to give it to her and please her. My God, Pierre, the joy of doing that. I say the strange, strange joy." There you have it. Why strange? I don't mean anything about the old house, but that intensity in his love for Julia which, I say again, stimulated in the subconscious of their friends the apprehension of menaces to their happiness in those black shadows under the hemlocks. I never bought but one house, and that we bought on paper. If, however, in the flush of our honeymoon, Annette and I had stumbled on one already made, and the doors and windows had flown open to her, and the sweet spirits had, as it were, sung her in, well, I suppose I should never have lost faith in my bride's reason. One can hardly imagine anything more dreadful than that for a honeymoon experience, but I'd have got her damned quick out of the sight of such a lunatic place, and I might have set fire to it into the bargain. End of Chapter 1.